Syrett Show.
Welcome back. Last week, on our survivalist segment, we were talking about neighborhood watch programs, or not vigilante groups, but neighborhood watch programs. Neighbors getting to know neighbors, keeping an eye on neighbors, because at a certain point, well, not at a certain point, that point has arrived. The police can't be everywhere. They're underfunded. And so you need to protect your property. You need to keep an eye on your property. You need to form groups so that you can watch out for each other. That's the idea behind the neighborhood watch program. And today we're going to sort of expand on that and discuss something called the the Citizen Emergency Response Team, CERT or CERT. It's an American program, but it can be adopted and brought up here. The Citizen Emergency Response Team, CERT. Stefan Verstappen is our emergency preparedness expert, the author of The Art of Urban Survival, ChinaStrategies.com, and FormingCommunities.com, the website. Stefan, welcome back. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Did you have a good weekend?
Yes, I got lots of exploration done on my bicycle. I went through all the parks and green areas in the small town I am here to familiarize myself with my environment, which is what everybody has to do anyways. You need to know your terrain. Sun Tzu, right? Know your terrain. And so wherever you live, you need to kind of explore the areas that you wouldn't normally go to by car. So footpaths and bicycle trails and nature areas, so that in case of an emergency, you know how to move around in your environment, and you know places you can go that are going to be safe.
Excellent advice. So what is the CERT exactly, this Citizen Emergency Response Team? This is an American idea, right?
Yes, this is an American idea, and we don't have anything in the equivalent of that in Canada, because if there's one thing the Canadian government doesn't want is civilians that are responsible for themselves. They want a population that is helpless and dependent entirely on the Canadian government. So this is not something that's very popular in Canada. But, I've done case studies, and which will appear in my book, of how community organized disaster teams provide far greater benefits and do a lot more good than FEMA or the Canadian government or the Red Cross. As a matter of fact, we think that, if there is a national disaster, and God knows we might see something like that coming, with all this talk of World War III and everybody's threatening to nuke everybody, and, well, there could be a giant disaster. So who's going to take care of us if there is a giant disaster? Well, I researched this a number of years ago, and it turns out that Canada has a program. It's called the National Strategic Stockpile Emergency Stockpile Initiative. And what that means is that Canada, the government of Canada, has warehouses all over Canada stockpiled with emergency food, emergency medical supplies, cots and blankets and tents and things like that. So, well, that sounds pretty good. There's only one caveat to that, and that is no one knows where these warehouses are. The local police don't know. The local fire department doesn't know. The local ambulance service doesn't know. Nobody knows where all these stockpiles are. So they're pretty useless. If we had a national disaster here in Canada and we needed emergency medical supplies and food and cots, oh yeah, we go out and we spend $65 million a year to supply these warehouses, but nobody knows where the warehouses are. But the good news is, glorious leader Justin Castro did find where some of these stockpiles were. Yeah, he found them all right. And you know what he did? And this was in thousand and
He sold them to the communist Chinese, I'm guessing. I don't know.
donated them to the communist Chinese. You are so right on.
Ah, that was a lucky guess. Okay, listen, we got to take a quick time out, and we'll come back. Stefan Verstappen is our emergency preparedness expert, author of The Art of Urban Survival. He is the survivalist. More right after these.
Back to the conversation on the Richard Syrett Show. News Talk, Saga 960 AM.
All right, the Citizens Emergency Response Team, Syrett. It's kind of an extension of the Neighborhood Watch program. Stefan Verstappen, our emergency preparedness expert, joins us every Monday for the Survivalist. All right, so we were talking about these warehouses where the government has supposedly stockpiled emergency, tents and cots and the like. And I was kind of just taking a wild guess, a flyer, if you will, that the federal government, gave that away to the communist Chinese. But I was thinking back to COVID when they gave a lot of that personal protection equipment, PPE, to a communist China. So they didn't stop there. They gave away basically the whole store, is what you're saying. So
yes, they did, Richard. And, you never cease to amuse me and surprise me at your quick wit and intelligence, because you nailed it on the head. They gave it to communist China. Now, if you're going to give away 16 tons of medical equipment, maybe Africa, maybe, maybe Southeast Asia, they might need it more than communist China. But, our glorious leader, praise and blessings be on his name. So listen, folks, we've talked about this before. The purpose of forming communities is to survive. And what we need to survive is the complete collapse of Western civilization. So now if we have a serious natural or a man-made disaster in Canada, and you think the Canadian government is going to help you, you better think again, because they can't. They don't. They already gave it away to China. So in the United States, they have a program called the Citizen Emergency Response Team, or Civilian Emergency Response Team, which is run under the auspices, believe it or not, of the Homeland Security Act. But what it is communities that work together, and they get the training they need, and they get the equipment they need. And so the equipment, they're all, furbished with green construction helmets and green vests, and they get ham radios, and they get flashlights, and they get emergency kits, and they get emergency supplies. Now, a lot of this we can do for ourselves. We can set up our own civilian emergency response team here in Canada. Just go to Syrett.com in the United States, and they have everything there, and just mirror what they're doing here in Canada. So they got the training manuals, how to set it up, how to run things, what to do during a national emergency. They've got all the information, all the the instructions on how to do it. Just go and download it. That's what I did. I downloaded it. A lot of that's going to be in my upcoming book, because it's such a great program, so that we will look after ourselves during a national disaster. And some of the duties that you will learn becoming a part of such a community is search and rescue, first aid, setting up medical tents, setting up food distribution, fresh water, psychological counseling, and rescuing, pets and animals too. You have a small animal hospital. These are all things that were done by local community organizations. For example, during Hurricane Harvey there in Houston, was FEMA there? No. Was the police there? No. Was the ambulance there? The fire department? Nobody was there. And it was the local communities that got in their boats and started rescuing people that were stuck on the roofs of their house, because there was huge flooding in the city, and picking up the pets and bringing them to shelters and tents and food and emergency medical supplies. Listen, this is what we have to do for ourselves here in Canada too. And it's not that complicated. It's not, beyond the means of most people. The thing is, folks, we got to get involved now. We got to get involved with our own communities. You got to volunteer some of your time doing something positive, because the world is going down the toilet. And if you're just sitting on the sidelines and watching, then you are of no benefit. It's a time to choose sides. So a community emergency response team, I would recommend that, you get 6 guys in your neighborhood. Who's got a boat? Who's got some supplies, and who's got equipment, and who's got radios? And if you don't have that, now I've just quickly researched it, and there are numerous government grants you could apply for, grants that will pay for instruction, pay for your education, pay for your equipment. So it's no money out of your pocket. You get together, you apply for these grants. We're going to start a community disaster response team here in Toronto or in London or wherever you are, and we are going to get the training we need. And believe me, the local police, fire, and ambulance will love you for it, because there's one thing that they all agree on, and that is having a civilian population or civilian help teams that have some training in this. And it's not like really complicated. It's just basic training, like a first aid course. And really helps and benefits in their efforts to save lives and protect people from further injury.
All right, so the first step is to go on. Well, the first step, I guess, is to figure out who you want in your community, your neighbors, or it could be, someone even across town, as long as you have, common goals and so forth. And these are people that you can get on with. Then you're going to go to Syrett.com, CERT, that's the Citizen Emergency Response Team, Syrett.com, and just mirror whatever the equipment and so forth that they're doing. Would it be a good idea? I mean, you need to store, there's some equipment involved. Would it be, what would you do? Rent a storage locker? Or if someone has one half of their garage is empty, what do you do?
Well, those are all possibilities, exactly. Like, the key is to work together as a community. So I can store someplace, some equipment in my garage. Maybe I can store, some food and water. And maybe you can store some medical supplies in your apartment. And maybe your neighbor down the street, he's got a boat, and he can store some supplies in the boat in case there's a flood. And we can, get out there and distribute the emergency supplies to people that need it. There's a lot of ways we can work around this. The key component is, again, we've talked about this, Richard, and this is what I'm harping on and preaching these days, is we've got to work together. We've got to form a community one way or another, whether it's to grow food, whether it's to homeschool, whether it's to prepare for natural disasters. And again, we are facing disasters. Anyways, this is going to come in handy. Now, the Civilian Emergency Response Team, let's say now, and again, I'm looking, everything we've been talking about is in anticipation of the complete collapse of Western civilization. So now we are in what we would call peacetime. World War III is brewing, but we're not in full scale just yet. So we can run this as a disaster relief community. But if everything collapses, that disaster relief community will have all the knowledge, the technique, and supplies needed to survive the complete collapse, to survive the end of the world. So we start this now, and we get the funding, and we get the training, and we collect the supplies, and we get the people together, and we work together. Okay, that's great. We're there in case there's a natural disaster. But when everything goes for a turd, that same community, I know we're on public radio. I got to watch my tongue, Richard. You know me, I want to swear all the time. But that community now morphs into your survival community. It is now the means for your personal survival. Just like we formed the neighborhood watch group, that neighborhood watch group will now evolve during the end times, whatever you want to call it, will evolve into a private police force to protect your community. Same thing with the community emergency response team. This will be your survival group, and this is what you will need to survive. So start it now. When things get bad, this will come in really handy.
All right. Stefan Verstappen is our emergency preparedness expert, author of The Art of Urban Survival, ChinaStrategies.com, FormingCommunities.com. Stefan, you have a great rest of the week. We'll talk again next Monday.
Great, Richard. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.